The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today we continue our conversation with former prosecutor and MSNBC NBC legal contributor Glenn Kirschner, and we're going to be talking today about the recent Tonya Chutkan decision, and we want to get Glenn's take on the appointments of Ed Martin, Kash Patel, and Pam Bondi. So let's listen in. So it's also been announced, I think it was today, Ed Martin will now be the head of the D.C. top prosecutor. And his history kind of shows that he is a bit like a right-wing activist. And I see you shaking your head already before I even got into it. So obviously you have an opinion about that appointment.
Yeah. Oh, Brooklyn, did you want to add something? She's got her hand up.
Yeah, she does that.
Yeah, just a quick question. I saw yesterday, was it, that Tonya Chutkan has denied the case about and said that Musk and his Muscovites can bounce in and do whatever they want, and I don't understand, or that he can have access. Sorry, my cats are anyway. I thought she was fair and a decent judge. So I don't understand. Can you please explain, Glenn, what that case is? Because I was unclear.
I can. Let me. Do you want Ed Martin first, or do you want Tonya Chutkan ruling first?
Take your pick.
Okay. So let me start with Tonya Chutkan ruling. So she is fair. Not only is she fair, I used to try murder cases against Tonya Chutkan when she was a public defender and I was a homicide prosecutor in D.C. I have the utmost respect for her fairness, her professionalism, her zealousness when she aggressively represented her client against the government, the prosecutor, in cases I handled. And she proved her bona fides as a fair, honest, independent, and impartial judge when she was presiding over the case that Jack Smith brought in D.C., the criminal case against Donald Trump for all things January 6th. What she did was she was asked to decide whether there was enough evidence to issue a TRO, a temporary restraining order, which is something that, if granted, is in effect for just a minute, so to speak, a very brief period of time while the case progresses. And what she said was, based on the 14 states that brought that suit, trying to essentially, in her estimation, put a stop to everything that Musk and the Doge are doing. She said the law requires clear evidence of immediate, irreparable harm that can only be remedied by a temporary restraining order. She said it appears that there's a lot of stuff going on that perhaps should not be going on. There is somebody who has no official position, Elon Musk, inside these agencies. They are trying to shut agencies down when only Congress can create and fund the agencies. They're trying to cut off funding. She said there seems to be a lot of stuff going on that may not be right. However, you didn't provide me with substantial evidence of the test is clear evidence of immediate irreparable harm. But here's what she told the states. You can come back the next day and file additional motions, provide additional information, and I will consider a temporary injunction, not just a temporary restraining order, but injunctive relief, which has slightly different standards. But if granted, it stays in place for a much longer period of time than a TRO. It can stay in effect for the entire litigation of the case, which can take months or years. So she called it the way she saw it based on the evidence and lack of evidence that was presented to her. Here's the catch-22, Brooklyn. Know what he's doing in there. There's no transparency. So it's hard to present actual evidence to a judge that says, here, this satisfies the clear evidence of immediate irreparable harm standard, because there's no discovery, right? There's no ability for the states to collect up information about what he's doing in there. So it's a catch-22. This was a very limited skirmish that was fought, that the Trump administration won and the states lost, but the case continues. And, we've just begun to hear about these legal challenges against Doge and company.
And sorry, just to bring that up, I was also listening to Harry Littman and another judge. I can't remember the guy's name, but someone whom Harry knows. Excuse me. It was, I don't know if it was in California, students, because Musk has access now, and Doge, they have access now to student loan data and information and personal this and that. They brought a case, the students did, and the judge also found against the students and for Musk, and for the same reason. And Harry also deconstructed the same way you did. The judge said that the students had not provided enough evidence, and of course, by the time anybody finds anything, the information has already been taken. And so, but again, that could be seen as a victory for Musk and Doge and Trump and all that. But as you say, there's no way to get any discovery.
Yeah. But this is step one in a multi-step process in these legal challenges that are being brought.
What's step two?
Step two would be now going to a temporary an injunction, a preliminary injunction, which is a little bit more involved and can be put in place longer. And here's the thing. We're going to be learning more about whatever nefarious acts are going on in these agencies as people inside the agencies begin to stand up and speak out and resign. And that is how you build the evidence to satisfy the preliminary injunction standard or the TRO standard. So yeah, stay tuned. Yes, this is a fleeting victory for, Doge, but I think it will only be fleeting. At least that's my hope. Let me go to the Ed Martin thing, because, that was my beloved home, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. I know Denise Chung well. So the problem with putting Ed Martin as the top prosecutor in Washington, D.C. is at least twofold. One, people may not know, unless you're steeped in all things Department of Justice, that there are 93 United States Attorney's offices in our nation and in the territories. 92 of them do nothing but federal prosecutions. One of them, one office, the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, does all of the federal prosecuting in DC, but we also do all the local prosecuting in DC. In a very real sense, we are also the district attorneys for the District of Columbia, and we bring 12 to 15,000 criminal prosecutions in local DC court every year. It would be like if you were in New York, taking the Manhattan Federal Prosecutor's Office, called the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office, and taking Alvin Bragg's District Attorney's Office for New York and putting them together in one ginormous prosecutorial office. That's what we are in DC, because DC is not a state. They don't have district attorneys, so the feds do it all. Ed Martin hasn't prosecuted so much as a traffic ticket. He hasn't spent 1 minute as a prosecutor in his career. That's the first problem. He's got a law license and he went to law school. That's like saying if somebody's got a medical degree and they've never performed surgery, it doesn't matter. They can walk into the OR and perform brain surgery. That's what they're asking Ed Martin to do. And people are going to get hurt, figuratively speaking, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they're potentially going to get hurt, literally speaking, in the streets of Washington, D.C., when you have somebody who is entirely unequipped and ill-suited to be the top prosecutor in Washington, D.C. The other problem is he's a Stop the Steal guy. He was one of the organizers. He was on a board that raised money for all these J6 defendants who attacked and beat the hell out of, in many instances, our police officers on January 6th. And he said, oh, that was like a Mardi Gras. He was there that day. He said, this is like a Mardi Gras. Lots of fun, lots of love. He is an election denier, a January 6th, acolyte. And that is, and here's what he did that is kind of big ticket unethical. He represented multiple January 6th defendants. I applaud him for that. Everybody has a Sixth Amendment right to zealous counsel, to representation. However, after representing J6 defendants and he became acting U.S. attorney, his name was on a motion in one of the cases against one of his J6 defendants. You can't be the defense attorney and the prosecutor in the same case. That will get him referred to bar counsel, it's so fast it'll make his head spin. So, and then he came in the first day, he fired 20 to 25 prosecutors who worked J6 cases who were still in a probationary status, so he could do it just to, exercise retribution against them. And there really is probably no well-placed wrongful termination suit. He said, we're going to be investigating all of y'all who handled J6 cases. Nothing is more corrosive to a law enforcement organization than to tell people that they're being assigned these cases one day and they're going to be investigated the next for investigating the cases they were assigned. That's insanity. That's the legal upside down. Ed Martin has absolutely no business being a prosecutor anywhere, and certainly not the top prosecutor in Washington, D.C.
But he is going to be the template, right?
Well, if he gets confirmed, and who doesn't get confirmed by this Senate?
Because there are a lot of, as you said, there are 93 other positions out there that are going to get filled. And, right now, I think they're probably mostly interim positions, if not holdovers from the Biden administration. So they're going to have to go out and find loyalists like him to take the lead in all of those jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I assume Congress will, because every U.S. attorney has to be Senate confirmed. And I assume they'll continue to lay down and confirm people who have no business exercising that power of government.
Yeah, we would be remiss if we didn't bring up Kash Patel. Can you give us some high level thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me give you the lowlights.
We do that, Glenn. We do the lowlights on Kash Patel really well.
Yeah, this is again a special kind of insanity that we're living through, because you have somebody who's up for FBI director. I don't think he's been confirmed yet. I know he made it out of committee
this week.
Yeah, who has an enemies list. He calls it a deep state list. The Washington Post accurately calls it an enemies list of people who have done Donald Trump wrong and who have done him wrong. That's kind of the opposite of what you need in an FBI director. But here are the things that are equally disqualifying. Kash Patel testified in a Colorado trial on behalf of Donald Trump when Donald Trump was being tried in a civil context for engaging in insurrection. And the judge found that Kash Patel's testimony was not credible. If a police officer is ever found to be not credible by a judge, that essentially ends that officer's career. At the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, we have something called the Lewis list, Lewis courtesy of a appellate court case. And anytime a judge does that, that officer goes on the Lewis list, and that person's usefulness as a police officer or an agent or an investigator is pretty much at an end, because we prosecutors can't put that person on the stand moving forward once a judge deems they're not a credible witness, because they would be cross-examined mightily on, well, wait a minute, why would this jury believe you when that judge said you're not credible? Really? We, the prosecutors, can't even sponsor the testimony of somebody like that, right? Kash Patel couldn't even testify in a trespass trial because a judge found him not credible, but he's going to head up the FBI? Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It is again, you want to talk about corrosive to an organization? Somebody like Kash Patel, who is going to expect all of the good men and women of the FBI, including the special agents, to follow his lead when he basically said, I got my enemies list and I'm prepared to use it. And here is the kicker, because there are three real points of ugliness with respect to Kash Patel's unsuitability to be director of the FBI. I don't know if people remember, but I think it was Adam Schiff who helpfully brought it back to our attention. As part of the January 6th criminal investigation of Donald Trump and others that Jack Smith conducted in Washington, D.C., Kash Patel was subpoenaed to the grand jury. And he went into the grand jury and he pled the fifth. He invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So the only lawful basis to plead the fifth is if you believe your truthful testimony would tend to incriminate you, make it seem like you committed a crime. It is a consciousness of guilt data point. He pled the fifth because he apparently knew that he'd committed a crime, and if he was required to testify truthfully before the grand jury, he would incriminate himself. Again, doesn't sound like the perfect fit to be the FBI director. Of course, Jack Smith immunized him and forced him to testify, because you can overcome somebody's invocation of the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination by immunizing them. That extinguishes that constitutional right because your testimony can't be held against you if you have immunity. And Kash Patel wouldn't even tell the Senate during the confirmation hearing what he testified about in the grand jury regarding the crimes of Donald Trump. That was the subject of the investigation in that grand jury proceeding. So, whether it's because you're not a credible witness, whether you pled the fifth because you believed you would incriminate yourself, whether you have an enemies list, and on and on. And I think, as a humorous aside, he also has a merch shop where if you want to buy Kash Patel Punisher socks, I'm not making that up, go on his website and look it up. All of the best FBI directors have merch shops selling Punisher socks, right? Again, you can't make this stuff up.
Well, it's like we have a president that sells shot glasses. So yeah, you've never seen that before. So we did the Kash Patel thing. Let's go one step higher. Pam Bondi. What are we thinking about?
I had hoped for the best, Mark. She was a former prosecutor. She was a attorney general in Florida, I think, for 8 years. I had hoped for the best. When she said in her confirmation testimony, there will be no enemies list at the Department of Justice, I was let down on day one when she published an enemies list in a memo. Yeah. Period. That's what she did. She said, we will be investigating, going after Jack Smith and his staff, Alvin Bragg and his staff, Letitia James and her staff, and the FBI agents and prosecutors who handled January 6th cases. I mean, for goodness sake, we saw the January 6th crimes with our own eyes. To suggest that the FBI agents and the prosecutors who handled those cases, who addressed those crimes that we all saw with our own eyes, have to be investigated. They're on the enemies list. Pam Bondi, in a very real sense, published her own enemies list on day one, and that disqualifies her, I think, as serving as a legitimate attorney general. But this is who we've got.
And we will continue our conversation with Glenn Kirschner in our next episode. We hope you'll join us. The Nova Society is a production of the Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening!